Hello and welcome to You've Seen It Before, movie reviews, the connections in mind, and welcome back to my reaction series to each and every episode of Season 2 of The Orville. Now, if you're just popping into this series now, it's just my short form series where I'm giving my thoughts on each episode of Season 2 as they come out, as well as certain analysis as to certain plot developments and character arcs that seem familiar and where you may have seen them before. So, with all that being said, and without further ado, let's get into Season 2, Episode 8 of The Orville, entitled Identity, Part 1. Now, this episode focuses on Isaac as a character who, at the beginning of the episode, is deactivated quite abruptly and without any seeming factor as to why. So the crew of the Orville decides that they must bring him to his home planet of Kalon in order to save his life, essentially. And when they arrive at Kalon, they find that Isaac is successfully rebooted. However, certain developments come about that show that the character of Isaac is not who he seems, and his people have impure motives as to whether towards the union of planets at this point. So this episode, as I said, focuses mainly on Isaac, and this harps mainly on his role as an emissary for his people who they sent him to the Union in order to determine whether or not the Union and or humanity is to learn from them, but also to determine if they are worth saving from the oncoming onslaught that is to come from the Kalon people. So that's an interesting twist, to say the least. But the fact that this is sort of an emissary role, it could have been brought up earlier in the fact, but it's sort of reminiscent of how Isaac is kind of like T'Pol from Star Trek Enterprise in a way that, not the fact that the Vulcans were going to annihilate Earth, but how T'Pol was essentially placed on Enterprise as an emissary or representative of the Vulcan people on a human ship. And theoretically to send back reports and help the crew to keep the Vulcan interests in mind and to send reports back to the Vulcan High Command, just as Isaac has been sending back reports to the Kalon people. A tenuous character parallel, but there nonetheless. However, the more concrete parallels can be drawn in the revelation near the latter part of this episode, when the crew of the Orville discovers the pit of the massive graves throughout the planet. In fact, many caverns full of biological bodies, very reminiscent of the discovery of the cave of Ego's children underneath the surface of Ego's planet in Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. But it is revealed that these were in fact the organic creators of the Kalon people as we know them today, the artificial life forms. And because they initially coexisted on their world, and by a certain point they reached an impasse, and the Kalon artificial life forms were forced, in their words, to destroy their creators and create a society that way. Not only is this reminiscent of really Battlestar Galactica in a way, as with the Cylons essentially wiping out humanity by saying that they cannot coexist with one another, and the creation essentially destroying the creator at that point, but also reminiscent of an episode of Star Trek Voyager called Prototype, in which a race of artificial life forms was created to serve a war, to fight a war. And once that war ended, the creators tried to deactivate these automated units, but the automated units saw that as a threat to their programming, and so they essentially killed their creators in that sense. So there's the main parallels in this episode. I would say this is definitely a turn for the Orville from going in the beginning of the series from a half comedy, half serious drama series to a real drama series, and very worthy of a sci-fi series in its own right, rather than, and it's definitely a dramatic episode. It'll be interesting. I'm very curious to see how they address this shift in tone for the Kaylon people, because up until this point, it seemed like the Kaylons were perceived more as just highly advanced beings, and they just saw humanity as a curiosity at this point. Now we see malicious intent in their sending of Isaac to study the humanity and the Union species in order to determine whether they're worth saving from their impending invasion and conquest. So there is a very sinister twist in this characterization of Isaac and the Kaylon people. And this did a good job, what a good two-parter should, and it will definitely make me curious to see part 2 next week and to see how they resolve this. Because, as they've said repeatedly, the Kaylon people and society is far more advanced than the Union. So whatever happens, I'm predicting is either going to be Claire is going to get to Isaac in some way, and Isaac is going to switch sides and betray his own people, or B, they're going to find some sort of technological flaw in the Kaylon society and exploit that to essentially wipe out all their fleet before they destroy Earth in one fell swoop. So essentially a Deus Ex Machina in some sort of way. So that's my prediction for episode 2, for part 2 of this block. So those are my thoughts. Let me know what you thought. What did you think about this episode? Did you like it? Did you not like it? What about my analysis? Is there anything you disagree with it? Is there anything that I missed? Let me know in the comments down below. Thank you so much for watching. You guys have been great. I appreciate whatever audience I can get. Be sure to look for my reaction to this week's episode of Star Trek Discovery, which I'll be posting soon, as well as my review of How to Train Your Dragon: The Hidden World, which will be coming out soon as well. So look for those. Thank you so much. But just remember, there is nothing new under the sun. And yes, you have seen it before.